There is a specific sound a man makes when he realizes the floor has been wrong under his feet for 19 months, and he is only now feeling it move. Craig didn't make that sound in my driveway. He said what he said and looked at me like a man who has explained something obvious to someone slow, and then he got back in his car and drove to the airport. I stood there holding a girl's duffel bag. I want you to understand something about that moment. I am 68 years old, and I have been in rooms where pipe under pressure let go, and men got hurt. I have lowered my wife into the ground. I have been to the kind of doctor's appointments where they close the door before they start talking. I know what it feels like when something important happens. I know the particular stillness of it. I stood in my driveway holding that bag, and I felt that stillness. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew something had just ended, and something else had just started, and Craig didn't know either one. Welcome to Real Life Verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Let me back up. I am Walter Hollenbeck, retired pipe fitter, 41 years at the plant. I live in a 3-bedroom ranch house I bought in 1982, in the same county where I was born, in the same town where I raised my son. My wife Carol died 6 years ago, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to burial. That is a different story. What you need to know is that this house has her cabinet hardware and her curtain rods, and the same magnets on the refrigerator that held Craig's school drawings when he was 7. Now they hold drawings from my grandson Aiden. Trucks, mostly. Some dinosaurs. The 3rd bedroom has a copy of a book called The Secret Garden on the shelf. Next to it there is a rock shaped like a turtle. I found that rock at the fairgrounds, and I told my granddaughter Maren it looked like a turtle, and she kept it. Maren is 11. She has been my granddaughter for 5 years, since Craig and Shelby finalized her adoption. She was 6 when it was done. She does not demand anything. She does not perform happiness or put on a show when I pick her up. She just comes in, takes off her shoes by the door, the way Carol always asked people to, and makes herself at home. She has been doing that since she was 6 years old, and she does it the same way at 11. That's who she is. I need you to know that before I tell you anything else. Craig, I raised in this house. He is 41 years old and works in IT management and makes a comfortable living. He is not a bad man in the ways that are easy to see. He shows up. He calls. He brought Aiden out to see me every other Sunday for years, and Maren too, and he sat at my table and ate what I cooked and thanked me for it. He coached Aiden's t-ball team 2 seasons running. He has a firm handshake. He also has a habit, when I offer to help with the grandchildren, of saying we'll handle it. And then I have noticed that he gets to his car and immediately has a conversation on his phone that he does not finish before he pulls out of the driveway. He thinks I don't notice that. I notice most things. Shelby is organized. Efficient. She keeps a color-coded calendar on the kitchen wall with everyone's activities written in different markers. I noticed once that Maren's entries were in pencil. I did not say anything about that. I filed it. That was not the first thing I filed, but I will get to the others. It was a Thursday in early October, 2 years before any of this came to a head. I was at Craig and Shelby's house for Sunday dinner. They'd moved it to Sunday, which I accommodated, and Shelby was talking to Aiden about something at school. She turned to Craig and said, "You know how the adopted one is," in the tone of someone making an observation about the weather. Maren was at the table. Craig did not say anything. He passed the bread. I put down my fork. I picked it back up. I finished my dinner. I drove home thinking about that phrase, the adopted one. Not her name. A category. Said in front of her, not about her, said in the way people speak when they've decided someone present doesn't fully count as audience. I told myself it was clumsy. People are clumsy. I had been clumsy in my life. I filed it and I drove home and I did not sleep particularly well, but I told myself I was overreacting. That was the first thing I filed. It would not be the last. Christmas that year I drove to Craig and Shelby's house and I watched them open presents in the living room. Aiden got a new bike and a gaming console. Maren got 2 paperback books and a sweater. I want to be precise about this because precision matters. I am not saying gifts have to cost the same. I am not saying there is a dollar threshold for love. I am saying I watched a 10-year-old girl open a sweater and say thank you and mean it, and I watched the adults in the room accept her thanks without any visible discomfort, and I thought about Carol. Carol would have said something. Carol was not a woman who let things pass when a child was involved. She would have found a way to make Maren feel seen that day. She was gifted at that, at making the unacknowledged thing acknowledged, without anyone having to be embarrassed. Carol was not there. I was, and I said nothing. I went home and I thought about it for a long time. There was one more thing I had to check before I was sure I was seeing a pattern and not a coincidence. March. Craig called me and mentioned Shelby was looking into private schools for Aiden. I asked if Maren would go too. Craig said they were just exploring options for Aiden right now because he tested well in math. June. Aiden's birthday party was at a rented pavilion with a hired magician and 40 guests. 3 months earlier, for Maren's birthday, they'd had cake at the house with 2 friends from school. When I'd asked Craig about it beforehand, he'd told me they were keeping things low-key that year. I brought Maren a bike for her birthday. Craig thanked me. He said that was too much. I said it wasn't. August. Sunday dinner. Shelby mentioned Aiden was signed up for travel soccer. I asked if Maren was playing. Shelby said Maren didn't want to. Later, when Shelby went to the kitchen, Maren told me quietly that she had wanted to play. But they said it was too expensive to do both kids. She said it the way children say things they have decided to accept. Not complaining, just reporting. I went to the garage when I got home that night and I sat with it for a while. November. I texted Craig to ask if I could take both grandchildren to the fairgrounds on Saturday to help me clean out the storage shed. He texted back, Aiden's got a game. Maren can go. I took Maren. She worked for 3 hours without a word of complaint. She stacked equipment and swept the cement floor and asked me if I needed her to hold the flashlight while I checked the wiring on the riding mower. At the end of the day, walking back to the truck, she asked me if Aiden didn't like spending time with her anymore. I said, Aiden loves you. He had a game today. She nodded. She accepted it. She got in the truck. I want you to stay with me here because this is where everything I thought I understood started to come apart. Not because of what she said, because of how she said it. Because an 11-year-old girl who has been in a family for 5 years should not have to wonder whether she is wanted in it. She should not have to ask that question. And she would not be asking it unless something, somewhere, had already given her a reason to doubt. I had been watching for 19 months. I had been filing things and telling myself I was overreacting. I had been giving the benefit of the doubt to people who had not earned any more doubt from me. There was one thing, through all of that watching, that Craig and Shelby had never thought to ask about. One thing I had done quietly without announcement, 14 months after Maren's adoption was finalized. I had never mentioned it. They had never asked. I am not going to tell you what it was yet, but I want you to know it existed, and I want you to know that when Craig got to Arthur Brunel's office on the morning of April 28, that thing was sitting on the table in a sealed envelope, and he did not know it was there. February. Craig and Shelby dropped the kids off for an afternoon visit. As they were leaving, Shelby mentioned they were planning a big trip for spring break. I asked where. She said it was a surprise for Aiden's birthday. I asked if everyone was going. Craig said, we'll see how the budget shakes out. March. Maren was at my house for the afternoon. She was quieter than usual. I asked if something was wrong. She said, Aiden talked about the cruise every night at dinner, and she wasn't sure if she got to go. She said they just didn't talk about it when she was in the room. I made her cocoa. I sat across from her. I said I was sure it would all work out. I do not know why I said that. I knew by then that it would not. April 11th. I was in the kitchen at 7 in the morning drinking coffee when Craig texted me that they were on their way. They were heading to the airport. Could I come outside when they pulled up? I drove to his house. They were loading the last bags into the car. Aiden was bouncing. Shelby had her travel jacket on. Maren was standing on the porch with a duffel bag. Craig walked Maren to my truck. He handed me the bag. He said she had her medication in the front pocket, and that she liked the grilled cheese cut in triangles, not squares. I said, "Aiden and Shelby in the car?" He said yes. I said, "Just the three of you going?" He looked at me. Not a long look. A look that said he was deciding how much to explain. And then he said it. "She's not really ours the same way Aiden is." He said it the way you'd explain a seating chart to someone who arrived late. Matter of fact, slightly tired, like the reasonableness of it should have been obvious. I looked at him. I did not say anything. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell him what I thought of that sentence, or of the man who said it, or of the 19 months that had been building to it. I took Maren's duffel bag. I told Craig to have a safe flight. I walked back to the truck. He drove away. I stood there. I want you to understand something about me. I spent 41 years in environments where a wrong reaction at the wrong moment could hurt someone. You learn to go still when things go wrong. You learn to feel the whole shape of a problem before you start moving. A man who grabs at a pressurized fitting without reading the system first does not help anyone. I was not going to grab. I had one thing Craig had never accounted for. I had one thing that had been sitting quietly for 5 years, growing, while he was busy not asking about it. I knew it was there. He did not. I took Maren inside and I made her grilled cheese cut in triangles. That's a good place to pause. If you've ever had someone in your life treat one person in the family like they mattered less, if you've ever been that person or watched it happen to someone you loved, I think you know exactly what Walter is carrying right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how this ends, because what Craig did not know about his father was about to change everything. Let's keep going. That night, Maren asked if she could watch TV in the living room. I said yes. I went to the garage. I got in the Ranger. I sat in the dark for 2 hours. I did not think about whether I was angry. That was not the useful question. The useful question was what I was going to do. I had watched 19 months of a child being sorted to the outside edge of her own family. I had watched it happen in small enough increments that each one could be explained away. Clumsy. Low-key. Budget. Aiden's special year. The thing about patterns is that they require enough distance to see. I had that distance now. I had something else. What I had, specifically, was this. 14 months after Maren's adoption was finalized, I drove to Arthur Brunel's office on a Tuesday afternoon, and I asked him to set up an irrevocable trust for my granddaughter, Maren. I had been thinking about it since the adoption went through, since I watched that 6-year-old girl come into this family and understood that she had no history here. No accumulated equity, no head start. I had been thinking about Carol, who always said that love without provision is just a feeling, and provision requires planning. Arthur drafted the documents. I signed them. And every month since then, for 61 months, I deposited $800 into that trust. Money from my pension, money from the rental income off the duplex property Carol inherited from her brother. $800 a month, every month. For 5 years. The trust is irrevocable. That is not an accident. That means it cannot be undone. It cannot be contested. It cannot be touched by anyone. Not by me. Not by Craig. Not by Shelby. Not by any court proceeding or family argument or legal maneuver Craig might think to try later. The morning I sat in Arthur's office, the balance was $64,700. Craig had never asked me about my finances. I had never volunteered. The trust was not the only thing I changed, but it was the thing that had been there the longest. It was the thing Craig would have the hardest time accepting, because it would tell him not just what I had decided now, but what I had been thinking all along. I called Arthur from the driveway on April 12th. He said to come in Thursday. I went in Thursday and again the following Tuesday. The revised will was executed on April 22nd. Arthur kept the original. I kept a copy. I told no one. On April 28th, 6 days after Craig and Shelby came home from the cruise, long enough for them to unpack, long enough for Craig to feel settled, long enough that he would walk into Arthur's office not expecting anything in particular. I called my son and asked him to come in for a meeting about estate planning. He said, "Sure, Dad. Should Shelby come?" I said it was just going to be us and Arthur. He said okay. He would be there at 10. Arthur's office is on the second floor of a converted brick building downtown. The conference room has a long oak table, 6 chairs, and a window that looks out onto the street. He has a brass desk lamp shaped like an oil derrick on the corner of his desk. He has had it since 1987, and it has never moved. I got there at 9:45. Arthur had 2 copies of the revised will on the table in a sealed envelope. He said, "You're allowed to change your mind about who gets what, Walter. That's what a will is for." I told him I was aware of that. Craig arrived at 10:02. He had his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked comfortable. He thanked Arthur for making time. He sat down across from Arthur and he smiled at me. Arthur walked him through the document. The duplex property. Carol's inheritance. 2 units. $850 a month net. Worth approximately $385,000. Goes to Maren in trust. Managed by Arthur until she turns 25. The house. My house. The one I bought in 1982. The one Craig grew up in. The one with Carol's cabinet hardware and Maren's room with the turtle-shaped rock. Goes to Maren outright. The life insurance policy. $150,000, the one I've carried since Craig was in high school. Beneficiary changed to Maren. Craig is listed as a secondary beneficiary for a token bequest of $10,000 and Carol's wedding ring to give to Aiden when he is older. Craig stared at the paper for a moment. Then he looked up. He said, "Dad, what is this?" I said, "This is me making sure Maren is taken care of." He said, "She's taken care of. She's got a home. She's got everything she needs." I said, "She didn't have a seat on the cruise." His face went red. He said the cruise was a special trip for Aiden. He said Walter didn't understand what it cost to raise 2 kids. He said Maren was fine. I opened the sealed envelope. I slid the trust statement across the table. 61 months of deposits. $800 each. $64,700. His daughter's name at the top. An irrevocable structure that had been in place for 5 years. Craig looked at it. He said, "You've been giving her money this whole time?" I said, "I've been making sure she has what she needs. Same thing I did for you." He stood up. He said this wasn't fair. He said I was punishing him. He said Shelby was going to lose her mind. I let him finish. Then I said, "She's not really ours the same way Aiden is." He went still. "You said that to me in my driveway. You meant it. So now you know. She's mine the same way you were. And I'm making sure she's provided for." Craig looked at the paper. He looked at Arthur. He looked at me. What left his face was not rage. It was something slower, the particular blankness of a man who has just understood how wrong his assumptions were and is calculating for the first time what that means. He didn't say anything. I thanked Arthur. I told Craig that Sunday dinners were still open if he wanted to bring both grandchildren. I did not wait for an answer. The stairs in that building are old wood. They creak. I noticed that on the way up, and I noticed it again on the way down. Outside it was a clear Tuesday morning in late April. The kind of morning that doesn't ask anything of you. I got in the Ranger. The vinyl on the passenger seat is still duct-taped where it's split. The thermos from Thursday morning was still in the cup holder, empty. I sat there for a moment the same way I'd sat in the garage 19 days before. But it was not the same. That night in the garage I had been holding a weight I didn't yet know how to put down. This morning it was just a truck. I had not been a grandfather who let things pass. I had been a grandfather who noticed. There is a difference. I started the engine and I drove home.